Well, good morning. We are here with Allan Bonner, an emergency management expert. Always great to get him on the show. He does crisis and emergency planning, and he's the principal, of course, at Allan Bonner Communications Management and a member of the Institute of Public Administration of Canada. Allan, it's good to talk to you again. I've spent the last couple of days in Ottawa wandering the protest sites here. And I wanted to start with an observation that I had and that I've written about in my first report from Ottawa. And I'm curious to get your take on it. Something I noticed I thought was interesting was how right now the government of Canada, the state, the federal, the provincial, the municipal, it doesn't matter. The Canadian state does not control fully its capital city. There are parts of the capital city that the state is not in effective control over right now. And what they've been doing, particularly in the daylight hours, is that they've been sending through large, highly visible police patrols. This is a way of maintaining a visible presence, but it is a visible presence. They are showing the flag right now. The police could not enforce their will in parts of Ottawa right now, even if they wanted to. And at this time, I'm not convinced that they do.
Well, I think I'm going to end up sucking and blowing at the same time because, number one, the state in all of its manifestations and levels of government and administration, the unelected people, they have a responsibility to maintain peace, order, good government, law and order, and what have you. And you've heard me go on about how there are 500,000 procurement officers in America, and they didn't procure the right things. So here we have in Ottawa a number of different police forces, including the OPP, the National Capital Commission, the people who guard politicians and what have you, and they are unable to do that, and that is a core responsibility of theirs. However, let me just give another perspective to this. Sometimes very mundane policing routine matters escalate into horrific events. The Watts riot in Los Angeles was a traffic stop. One riot in Chicago was a couple of returning GIs having an after-hours drink with some buddies after they'd come back from Vietnam, and the police decided to break that up, and that became a riot. Often the authorities are incompetent. The National Guard in America shot out streetlights to protect themselves. The National Guard on the next street thought they were being shot at and returned fire, and the National Guardsmen are shooting at each other. Arab Spring began with someone trying to enforce a permit to sell goods in a flea market like the Paris flea market, and we had death, Arab Spring, etc. So, it is not the easiest thing. I am a little empathetic with the police chief in Ottawa who says there may not be a policing solution to this. Now, maybe what there should have been is what you're calling the security business perimeter security. How did the trucks get all downtown Ottawa anyway? Are they permitted to be there? An SUV will rip up a street and cobblestones and do damage to a downtown city street. Imagine what an 18-wheeler does. So maybe they let this go too far. And then you have, pardon the filibuster here, but then you have acquiescence. If the police are assisting and guiding and allowing truckers to move cans of diesel fuel, which has a low flash point. It's not like gasoline, but it is dangerous. They're allowing them to move, and then all of a sudden they forbid it. They allow the blowing horns, and then all of a sudden they ticket them. They are sucking and blowing at the same time. And finally, the military, which are always mentioned, are not necessarily the best aid to the civil power. And I have been on most bases, as you know, in Canada, worked for the military a lot, have great respect for them, but they are not trained to maintain law and order in a civilian context. They've done well in peacekeeping, but there is at least some thought that their training is not conducive to providing this kind of assistance. Okay, if you haven't cut me off yet, it's your turn to speak.
Well, I appreciate that. For what it's worth, I think using the military could only be a last resort, or if we use the military, we have to use it smartly. I think there's a difference between sending in an infantry battalion and sending in some engineers with heavy trucks to haul away obstacles. I think that's qualitatively a very different thing. I think, if the police are able to go in and restore control over the contested areas and, make whatever arrests or disperse the crowd or hand out tickets, like whatever it takes, I think if the military brings in some heavy lift vehicles and drags away disabled semi-trucks, I don't think anyone goes too crazy about that. I think if these encampment sites see the Van Dews or the Princess Pats walking towards them, we're going to have a very different situation on the ground here. Allan, I, like you, do think a lot about state capacity. I do think about issues like the rule of law and the authority of the state. The authority of the state, Allan, is a very fragile thing because countries like Canada don't really have the raw power to enforce its will. Countries like Canada, and I think this is true broadly across the democracies, they are governed with the consent of the governed, right? Like we don't need a lot of referees because we all generally have agreed to play by the rules here. When we start dealing with a group that has decided not to, we get in very quickly into a very difficult situation here. My gut feeling is that Ottawa would need thousands of police reinforcements. Can Ontario scrape together thousands of police reinforcements? Yeah, I think they could. But as we're already seeing, another one of these protests has now popped up in Windsor. So where are you going to find the reinforcements to deal with that one?
Well, exactly. The capacity is really not there. The consent of the government is an absolutely excellent phrase. And there can be slip-ups, and there can be law and order maintained, but at a huge personal cost. And by the way, there's one other element here, and I refer to it as a safety valve. People work hard. People maybe are unemployed. They're downtrodden. They have grievances. Some are pumped up a bit. But basically, we have peace, order, and good government through the consent of the government, as you mentioned. But we have safety valves, and it is soccer hooliganism in the UK. It is going on strike every now and then in France. The Richard hockey riot and the riots in Edmonton and Vancouver when they win the cup. It might be some minor lawlessness like drinking at a picnic site or drinking at a hockey game. And we have to decide how much of this we're going to tolerate. If Idle No More or Black Lives Matter or Defund the Police or some other, group goes into Ottawa, marches up and down, has placards, what have you, and they're gone in a day and a half, they may well have broken a law. But big deal. What is the hill you're going to die on? How many days are you going to put up with it? How many weeks? So I think the safety valve is another good phrase to put into the conversation.
Yeah, it occurred to me, Allan, speaking with Allan Bonner, wandering the area yesterday, and I think you know this, I had embedded at Occupy Toronto for some time as well. If the Ottawa protest was thousands of people colonizing a park and hanging out there and saying we're not going to leave until the mandates are gone, I think that's a very, very different thing. I think the police kind of go, well, okay, that's a right to protest here. I think there are two things that have made this protest materially different. One is obviously the seizure of public roads and the disruption of that. But I also think is that the trucks themselves are a wild card here. These are a protest force multiplier here. The danger potential that they pose if they decide to ram someone, the obstacle that they pose, and also the impact of the air horns. On the one hand, this has been a game changer, but I suspect we're going to see more and more of this going forward. Every protest movement in the world has seen this, and we are already seeing these pop up in other democracies.
Well, Chief Justice Dixon of the Canadian Supreme Court said a taxi cab is not a means of free expression. However, if there are 100 taxi cabs circling City Hall protesting gas prices or something, then they may be. And I cited him in the Occupy movement because the parks in Toronto were open. I walked through them in a suit on my way to speak on the television about the court ruling. So you're right. If this were respectful, if it were in a park, it'd be a different matter. But we may have a court ruling that says an 18-wheel truck is a medium of free expression in this democracy. So, go figure. We may have some surprises coming up.
I think we've had a few surprises so far, and I guess we shall see what the days ahead bring. Allan, I always appreciate your sober commentary and your smart takes. I thank you very much for this, man. Good luck to us all, and we'll check in with you as things go on.
Good fun. Stay safe.
You too. Allan Bonner, emergency management and crisis management expert, and he's here with us as the principal of his own company where he does great work. He is with Allan Bonner Communications Management, Inc.